All right, let's dive right into today's deep dive.
Sounds good to me.
And this one takes us into the world of swimming and sailing.
Perfect for summer.
Exactly right. We're going to be dissecting an episode from the podcast Speak English YouTube channel.
Oh, nice.
It's specifically their English learning podcast conversation episode,
Okay.
really geared towards advanced learners. And think of this deep dive as like, your little cheat sheet to sounding totally natural,
Yeah.
whether you're at the beach or out on a boat this summer.
What I really like about these types of podcasts, these language learning podcasts, is just how they make the lessons feel so natural.
They do.
You're not just, stuck with a textbook.
Right.
You're learning through these everyday situations.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
And this episode, it totally does that.
Okay.
The setup is so simple. It's just two friends hanging out on a sailboat.
Nice.
One of them decides to jump in for a swim.
Okay.
It's super relatable, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But they managed to pack in so many useful words and phrases
It's great.
in that short amount of time.
Yeah.
But before we even get to the swimming part, they actually start by talking about a couple of key sailing terms.
And these terms, well, they really highlight something kind of interesting about English pronunciation.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Right. It can be a bit tricky at times.
Absolutely.
Especially for those who, are still learning the ropes.
Totally.
So they start off with sailing, which is, pretty straightforward.
Makes sense.
But then they introduce the word anchor.
Oh, yeah. Anchor.
Spelled A-N-C-H-O-R.
I mean, who would guess that you're not supposed to say the Chi sound at all?
Right. It's a classic example of those silent letters that can trip up even advanced English learners.
Absolutely.
The funny thing is, these silent letters, they often come from, how the language itself has changed over time, you see.
Oh, interesting.
And so the pronunciation, it's shifted over the centuries.
Yeah.
But the spelling, it stayed the same. And that creates these little puzzles.
I like that little puzzles for us to figure out. So it's like a history lesson and a vocabulary lesson.
All rolled into one.
All in one.
Love it.
So, all right, we've got sailing and anchor down.
Yeah.
Let's actually dive into the swimming styles that they mention in the podcast dialogue.
Because things are about to get a little more active.
They are.
Yeah.
And they picked some really visually evocative styles. We've got doggy paddling, breaststroke, and backstroke.
I can picture it now.
I know, right? Each one you can just see it in your mind.
Absolutely.
So, okay, let's start with doggy paddle.
Okay.
I mean, that classic just flailing around in the water.
Yeah.
It's not exactly graceful, is it?
Not quite the most elegant stroke.
No.
But you know what's fascinating about doggy paddling?
What's that?
It's actually like a natural, instinctive human response to being in water.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're kind of hardwired to try and stay afloat that way.
Interesting.
So even if someone's, never had a swimming lesson, if they suddenly find themselves in deep water, they might just start doggy paddling without even thinking about it.
Wow.
It's like a built-in survival mechanism.
Yeah, that's amazing. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to breaststroke.
Okay.
Now this one, the podcast describes it as swimming like a frog, which I love that imagery.
It is quite a visual.
It is. You've got those circular arm movements and the frog-like kick. It's very distinctive.
It is. It's very unique.
And the breaststroke actually has a pretty long history.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, it's one of the oldest documented swimming styles.
Wow.
There's evidence suggesting it was used way back in the Stone Age.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
People swimming like that thousands of years ago.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So finally, we have backstroke.
Oh.
Which is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
You're on your back,
right,
kicking your legs, making those big arm circles.
I find backstroke so relaxing.
Oh, me too. It's very...
Just floating along.
Yeah, very chill.
Enjoying the view.
Especially if you're in a beautiful lake or the ocean.
Oh.
Sharing it.
Yeah.
But, now I want to get to the part of this podcast that I actually found super helpful.
All right.
It's the Fluency Builder section.
Okay.
They highlight these three phrases that are just so useful.
Nice.
Okay. So we've got take a dip for a little while and straight towards.
These are great examples of how idioms can really make your English sound so much more natural.
Uh-huh.
It's the kind of thing you'll hear native speakers using all the time.
Yeah.
Like the key to unlocking that effortless flow.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's break down each one.
Okay, great.
First up, take a dip.
Okay.
Essentially, it means go for a quick swim.
Yeah.
But it's a bit more informal and playful than just saying, go swimming.
Okay, so like instead of saying,
Right.
it's so hot, I'm going to go swimming in the lake.
Yeah.
You could say,
it's so hot out, I'm going to take a dip in the lake.
perfect, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, now what about for a little while?
Now this one's pretty versatile.
Yeah.
You can use it for pretty much any activity that you're doing, for a short amount of time.
So like, I'm going to read for a little while before bed.
Exactly.
Or we chatted for a little while before the meeting.
Perfect examples.
Okay, so it's basically a way to say how long something lasts without being too specific.
Exactly.
Okay, and last but not least, we have straight towards.
Now, the example they use in the podcast is a bit intense.
Intense.
They talk about a shark coming straight towards someone.
Oh, no.
But, it definitely gets the point across.
Okay.
So straight towards means to move directly in the direction of something.
All right, so like giving directions, you could say,
Yeah.
walk straight towards the park.
Yes.
And you'll find the cafe on your right.
Perfect example.
Okay, yeah, so now I'm feeling like a lot more confident about actually using these phrases.
That's the goal.
In real life.
Absolutely.
But, speaking of memorable moments, the podcast host, Erica, she shares this hilarious anecdote about her grandfather.
I love a good anecdote.
I know, and this one, you've got to hear this.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So it all starts with Erica's family.
Okay.
They have a summer house on a lake.
Nice.
And it's on, like, a small island.
Okay.
And then her cousins, they have a house on another island nearby.
Okay, so 2 island families.
2 island families.
Got it.
So one evening, everyone's having dinner at the cousin's house, except for Erica's grandfather.
Okay.
He decides to stay at his own place.
Right.
So it's getting late.
Yeah.
And Grandpa decides to head back to his own island to pick up his wife.
Okay.
It's dark out. He doesn't have any lights on his boat.
This doesn't sound good.
And then, bam!
Oh, man.
His cousin, in his own boat,
oh, my goodness,
crashes right into him.
Oh, no. What happened?
So the impact, it flips Grandpa's boat.
No.
Completely over.
Wow.
Sending him tumbling into the lake.
Oh, my God.
But luckily, Grandpa was totally fine.
Oh, thank goodness.
Can you imagine?
That must have been quite a shock.
I know, right?
So what happened next?
Okay, so it gets even crazier.
Okay.
Because to make matters worse, the engine, it sinks.
Oh, no.
To the bottom of the lake.
Oh, dear.
They ended up having to hire scuba divers to retrieve it.
What a story.
I know. But the best part is, Erica said her grandfather.
Yeah.
He tells this story every year.
Of course.
So it's become like a family legend.
I love that.
It's just so funny.
It's a good reminder that, even mishaps can make for great stories.
They really can.
And it's also a nice example of how we can use language to share experiences, right?
Totally. And not to mention all the vocabulary that comes up.
Oh, absolutely.
In the story.
It's all there.
We've got the lake and the island, the action of sailing, and then the unfortunate collision.
Right. And even the emotional response of shock.
Exactly.
It's like a perfect little vocabulary lesson disguised as a funny story.
I love it.
It shows that, language learning can happen anywhere.
Totally.
Even in the most unexpected situations.
Absolutely. So I think we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've got those sailing terms, those swimming styles, those super useful idioms.
Yeah, and a memorable anecdote.
It's amazing how much they squeeze into one short podcast dialogue.
It really speaks to the effectiveness of these podcasts.
It does.
They're so well crafted.
Yeah.
It's not just about, throwing a bunch of words at you.
Right.
It's about how they're presented.
Yeah.
And the context that they're used in.
It makes such a difference.
It really does.
They make language come alive.
Exactly.
But before we wrap up this part, I kind of want to get your take on something.
Sure. What's on your mind?
Well, we've been talking a lot about, actively learning vocabulary. But I'm curious about your thoughts on, passive learning.
Okay.
Just kind of absorbing language through exposure.
I see.
Do you think that just by listening to podcasts like this one, someone can actually improve their English, even if they're not actively studying every single word and phrase?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the core of how we, as humans, acquire language. And I absolutely believe that passive learning,
Yeah.
it plays a huge role.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to fluency and pronunciation.
Okay.
Even if you're not, consciously focusing on every single word,
Yeah.
your brain is still in the background, processing the sounds and the patterns of the language.
Interesting.
It's like your brain is always working behind the scenes, even when you're just relaxing and enjoying a podcast.
That's pretty cool.
It is. And, over time, that repeated exposure, it really could have a big impact.
Interesting.
Think about how, children learn their first language.
Right.
They spend years listening and absorbing before they ever, open a textbook or start formally studying grammar rules and all that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's all about creating that rich linguistic environment where your brain can just naturally soak up the nuances and the rhythms of the language.
It's almost like it's happening without you even realizing it.
Exactly.
That's pretty powerful.
It is.
So even if you're not, actively memorizing lists of words, just immersing yourself in the language can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like such a good reminder that language learning isn't just about textbooks and drills.
Exactly.
It's about finding ways to make it a part of your everyday life.
It's about finding the joy in it.
Yeah.
It should be an enjoyable experience.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part
of our deep dive.
Absolutely.
We've explored sailing terms, swimming styles, those fantastic idioms, and even heard that hilarious anecdote
the boating mishap.
About the boating mishap.
Classic.
But we're not done yet.
Not even close.
In the next part of our deep dive, we're going to sort of shift gears a little bit and explore some of the broader themes
I'm intrigued
that emerged from this podcast episode.
Okay.
We're going to talk about how these vocabulary lessons, how do they actually connect to real-world communication?
Important question.
We're going to talk about the importance of storytelling and the power of humor.
Always a good thing.
In language learning.
Looking forward to it.
So stay tuned for more insights and inspiration.
Sounds good.
Coming up after the break. Welcome back.
Okay, so we're back. And I'm so ready to dig into part 2 of this of this deep dive. I think it's fascinating how much we've already learned from just one short dialogue.
It's amazing how much they pack into these podcasts.
And I'm especially excited to kind of dive into those broader themes that you mentioned. How do these, seemingly simple vocabulary lessons actually translate into real life communication?
That's a fantastic question.
Yeah.
And I think it gets at the heart of why these podcasts are so effective.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about, memorizing isolated words and phrases.
Right. It's not just about a vocabulary list.
Exactly. It's about giving you the tools to actually use those words and phrases in meaningful
conversations.
Yes, in real conversations. Yeah. Think about those idioms we were talking about. Take a dip for a little while.
Yeah. Straight towards. Yeah, straight towards. These are things that native English speakers just use all the time without even thinking about it.
Right. It just flows naturally.
So if you can incorporate those into your vocabulary, you're not just expanding your word bank.
Your word bank, right?
You're actually adopting.
You're adopting the rhythm, the pattern.
These are the patterns
of authentic English speech.
Yeah, it's like learning the secret code.
And a secret code.
To sounding like a native speaker.
More natural.
Yes.
More confident.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
But I'm also curious about, the role of storytelling in language learning.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
That anecdote about the
about the boating mishap.
The boating mishap.
Yes.
It was so entertaining and so memorable.
You're memorable.
Do you think
that kind of storytelling actually helps us learn and retain vocabulary better?
Absolutely.
Well.
Because stories, they have this power to engage our emotions and capture our imaginations.
Yeah.
And when we're emotionally invested in something, we're way more likely to remember the details.
It was like those stories create these sticky webs in our brains.
Oh, I love that analogy.
And the vocabulary gets caught in those webs.
The vocabulary gets stuck in the web.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes it harder to forget.
And think about it, the anecdote about the boating mishap. it wasn't just funny.
Right.
It also used a bunch of the vocabulary we had just learned.
Yeah.
We had the lake and the island, the action of sailing, the unfortunate collision.
And the emotional response of shock.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So by hearing those words used in a real-life context, it reinforces their meaning and makes them more accessible for our own use.
It's like seeing those words in action.
Exactly.
Instead of just on a page.
Exactly.
And I think the humor element is also like
absolutely
super important.
Humor is key.
I know I'm going to remember that story for a long time.
Yeah.
And that means I'm also going to remember the vocabulary that went along with it.
And humor, it's such a powerful tool for language learning.
Really?
Yeah, it lowers our inhibitions.
Okay.
Makes the whole learning process more enjoyable. When we're laughing, our brains are just more open to new information.
Interesting.
And we're less likely to, feel self-conscious about making mistakes.
It's like humor gives us permission to play with the language a little bit.
To experiment.
To experiment.
Yeah.
Without being afraid to mess up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
Because language is all about communication, connection.
Right. It's about connecting with other people.
Exactly.
And like sharing experiences.
And what better way to connect than through laughter and shared stories.
Totally. Okay, so we've talked about how this podcast uses real life scenarios, idioms, storytelling, humor to make language learning more engaged.
More engaging and effective.
But like, what are some key takeaways?
Good question.
For a listener, as they continue their English language journey?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to remember that language learning shouldn't feel like a chore.
Okay.
It should be enjoyable.
It should be fun.
It should be fun.
Yeah.
And this podcast episode really shows us how to do that.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, learning English can be fun.
Exactly.
You can laugh. You can connect with others. You can even learn from like silly boating mishap.
Exactly. So embrace that sense of playfulness and curiosity. You'll be more motivated.
Yeah.
You'll retain what you learn. And you'll be more confident.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that message.
It is inspiring, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very inspiring.
Yeah.
And empowering.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about real life scenarios.
Yeah.
Idioms, storytelling, humor. What other like gems can we...
Well, I think it's important to highlight the value of actively engaging with the language.
Yeah, okay.
Because while passive listening is definitely helpful, actively practicing, the vocabulary and grammar you're learning is essential.
Okay.
Like the difference between admiring a painting from afar and actually picking up a brush and trying to paint yourself.
I like that.
The real learning happens when you get your hands dirty.
When you actually do it.
When you actually do it, yeah.
Okay, so what are some ways that our listener can actually, like...
Well, they could try using those idioms in their own conversation.
Okay.
They could even try telling a funny story using some of the vocabulary from the episode.
Yeah.
And of course, they could always check out more episodes of the podcast.
Yeah. Podcasts speak English.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get more inspiration.
Get more practice.
Oh, right.
More practice.
Yeah. And I think also, like, finding a language partner or a group.
Oh, that's a good one.
Of fellow learners to practice with.
Having someone to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, to like
get feedback from.
I can make the learning process so much more enjoyable
and rewarding.
Exactly.
It's like language learning doesn't have to be this solitary pursuit.
It can be social.
Yeah.
Collaborative.
Yeah.
In the end, that's what language is all about. Connecting with others.
Connecting, yeah.
Sharing our thoughts and feelings.
Sharing experience.
Experience, exactly.
So we've talked about real-life scenarios.
Yes.
Idioms. Storytelling.
Humor. Humor's important.
And even the value of actively engaging with the language.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot.
It is.
But there's one more thing.
Okay, that's that.
That I want to tackle.
Yeah, right.
In our final part.
Okay.
It's a question.
Yeah.
That's been kind of simmering in my mind this whole time.
I'm intrigued.
What does it actually mean to be fluent in a language?
The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Every language learner wants to know.
So it feels like this moving target.
It does, yeah.
Like, is it about perfect grammar?
Right.
A massive vocabulary.
Right. Like, how many words do you have to know?
Right. Is there like a magic number?
Yeah.
Or is there something more to it?
That's what we're going to find out in the final part of our deep dive.
So stay tuned. Okay, so we're back for the final part of this deep dive.
I'm ready.
All right, and it all comes down to this one big question.
Okay.
What does it actually mean to be fluent in a language?
It's the question that's been on everyone's mind.
I know, right? Like, throughout this whole conversation, I've just been thinking about that.
Well, let's unpack it.
Yeah, because it feels so elusive, right?
It does.
Like, is it about having a massive vocabulary? Is it about perfect grammar?
Is there, like, a secret formula?
Or is there, like, something more to it?
I think it's easy to get caught up in this idea that fluency is about perfection.
Okay.
Like, you have to reach this unattainable level where you never make a mistake.
Right, like you're just this walking dictionary.
Yeah, a grammar guru.
Grammar guru.
But in reality, fluency is way more nuanced.
Okay, so it's not just about, like...
What, you know...
No, not entirely. Vocabulary and grammar, they're important.
Yeah.
But the real essence of fluency, I think it lies in being able to communicate effectively and effortly.
So it's about, like, being able to express yourself.
Yes.
And understand others.
And understanding others.
And, like, navigate real-life situations.
Yeah, world situations, exactly. Using the language.
So it's less about, like, what, you know...
It's more about...
how you use it.
How you use it.
It's about confidence.
Yeah.
Adaptability. Okay. And being able to connect with people.
Connect, yeah.
Even if you make a few mistakes.
That's okay to it is. Sometimes. It's part of the process.
That's good to know.
Even native speakers make mistakes.
Really?
All the time.
I guess that's true.
It's part of, you know, the beauty of human communication. It makes it feel a little less intimidating.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because when we let go of this need to be perfect, we can actually open ourselves up to taking more risks, experimenting, and ultimately, you know, becoming more fluent.
More fluent. I like that.
Yeah, so.
That's like giving yourself permission to play with the language a little bit.
Absolutely.
Have fun with it.
Have fun.
And remember, fluency is not like a finish line.
It's a journey.
It's a journey. There's always more to learn.
Always.
Always more to explore.
Always something new to discover.
That's true.
Yeah.
So it's this, like...
ongoing process.
It's an ongoing process of growth and discovery.
So as long as you're enjoying the process...
Exactly.
That's what matters.
That's what matters.
Well...
yeah.
I think that's a perfect note...
I think so, too.
...to end on.
We've come to the end of our deep dive.
It's been a great journey.
It has.
Exploring all these ideas.
And I feel like I've learned so much about, you know, language learning.
Yeah, it's been a good reminder.
In general.
It has.
So I hope our listeners feel inspired.
Inspired to keep learning.
Continue their language.
Keep exploring.
Learning journeys.
Absolutely.
And remember, fluency is not about perfection.
I know.
It's about connection.
It is.
So go out there.
Yes.
Use those language skills.
Use your skills.
Connect with the world.
Connect with the world.
Until next time.
Happy learning.
Happy learning, everyone.